This podcast is a presentation of GSU's Digital Media Group. Visit us at dmgatl.com.
Hi, my name is Ivan Lichtenstein.
And my name is Jackson Witsell.
And this is Movies of State. And today we're going to be discussing what is coming up in February, which is going to be the Oscars. And we're going to be talking about our picks for Best Picture of the Year and Best Director of the Year. So the films that are selected to be nominated the nominees of Best Films of the Year are The Big Short, Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, The Revenant, Room, and Spotlight. And the Best Director nominations are going to Lenny Abrahamson for Room, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu for The Revenant, Tom McCarthy for Spotlight, Adam McKay for The Big Short, and finally, George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road. So I'm going to give it over to Jackson to see what his picks are for Best Director and Best Picture of the Year. Jackson?
All right, so let's see. For Best Picture, I would say my choice would be Mad Max Fury Road. I talked about it in our last episode about the many good things about this movie. I believe it to be the best action movie we've had in years, and it's got really good acting, really good pacing and dialogue. The dialogue is actually set to a minimum, which is really nice because you get to see.
Is it like so? Because the dialogue's pretty much set to a minimum, so
yeah.
So like we could just focus on the action more. Which a lot of action movies don't really have nowadays. Because if you see an action movie like Taken 3 or Taken 2 or whatever Liam Neeson movie's coming out, because he's always in action movies, it's really dialogue. Not dialogue. It's super dialogue. Yeah, it is super dialogue driven. And then there are scenes of action which aren't really filmed well.
Oftentimes there's a lot of exposition too that's given that isn't always that necessary, because if you're going to see an action movie, you're usually not going necessarily for the background or the history of what you're looking at, or
you just want to be
extreme
entertained. That's the simple
explanations
answer.
of dialogue. Yeah, I mean, you're just looking for action. Maybe some, obviously you want a better story than no story at all, but it's good to find a balance, and Mad Max Fury Road had the best balance we've seen in an action movie in years. It really had characters that you could relate to, that you could understand their dilemmas. None of the characters were invincible, which is a problem in a lot of modern day action movies.
Yeah.
They get roughed up, they get beaten up, they fight, they are tough, but they're not invincible, and I think that's an important thing to focus on in a good action movie.
Yeah. Because I remember the biggest mistake Die Hard 5 made, in my opinion, it's a terrible movie, but the biggest mistake they made was that they made John McClane's character invincible. And I don't think that's good, because if you make your character invincible, he's not relatable to the audience. Because in the past movies, when you see John McClane going through a struggle, you relate to that because he's hurt and he's battered and bruised, and then that could be you, because you can also get battered and bruised. Whereas in Die Hard 5, he's super invincible. He's like Superman, and no one in the audience, no one in real life is like Superman at all. So I think that fact that Mad Max Fury Road had characters that weren't invincible and that were relatable to the audience is a big plus for it being nominated.
Yeah, it really made the movie feel, it was set in an environment that's not super realistic as far as we know, but it made the world feel very real that it was in. Ivan, do you want to talk about your pick for Best Picture? All right.
My pick for Best Picture of the 88th Academy Awards is going to be The Revenant. And my reasoning why it would be The Revenant is because there's more... It's really singular in the way it was filmed, because there aren't a lot of movies that release nowadays that use natural lighting and there are no directors, or there's no cast, or there's no crew that will spend 9 months in the freezing wilderness just to film one movie.
Really shows the dedication of these people who put this movie together.
And also the way it was filmed. I know there's another category for best cinematography, but I think his name's Emmanuel Lubezki, I believe, who did the cinematography for this movie, and I think his cinematography is really distinct, because it's really ethereal, and by that I mean it's really beautiful to look at, because you'll see a lot of movies nowadays that won't do a lot of long takes. I think the only movies that will do long takes nowadays are more like Steve McQueen movies, such as Shame, Hunger, and 12 Years a Slave. But Lubezki's cinematography kind of tricks the viewer into believing that one shot is going on for too long. And so I think that's one of the factors of this movie that will definitely play out as a great category for Best Picture. And I hopefully it wins Best Picture, but we don't know yet. And another thing I liked about this movie was that it's very singular in its direction. And by that I mean there's no other director that I think that could make this movie. Because Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu is a very distinct director. And the way he directs is like no one else. Like, if Wes Anderson made this movie, it would be a completely different movie. If Steven Spielberg made this movie, it would be a completely different movie. If Spike Lee made this movie, it would be a completely different movie. And I'm just naming a variety of directors because all those directors have just singularity within their films. Like,
So
don't you agree?
you're saying that this director really added his own personal style to it that can't be replicated.
And that's that's the number one thing directors should have in their style. Because if they replicate another, then you're gonna have the audience picking out saying, "Hey, he copied him, and he's just like him," and stuff like that. Like,
that's signs.
It doesn't really add a lot of singularity. It doesn't
director.
really add a lot of distinction in your style as an auteur of film. And another thing I liked about the movie is that I thought I had one of the best casts of the year. I don't think it was the best cast of the year, but it still was. It's like neck and neck for another film, Spotlight, that I'll talk about later. But like DiCaprio this season, I think this is his season to earn an Oscar finally.
It's about time.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, all the other films that were released pre-Revenant, he was good in, but I never thought like he was Oscar worthy. Like everyone is raving about him to be. But I thought Tom Hardy's character was great. I thought everyone in this movie was great. Domhnall Gleeson, Will Poulter, everyone was really great.
Yeah, that's a good cast. I mean,
yeah, and I like a lot of his cast in his movies aren't really the same cast like Tarantino, and that's one thing I like about him. So I think I've said my part for like why I think Revenant should win Best Picture. We're gonna turn it over to Best Director.
Okay,
We're gonna let Jackson have a go at that.
Honestly, considering that I haven't seen a ton of movies on this list, I'm going to go with George Miller as being the best director on this list for Mad Max Fury Road. I think what George Miller really brought to this project that was really good was the fact that he directed the other ones before this. So even though it had been several years...
It's like his baby almost, pretty much.
Oh, yeah. It's been a couple decades since he's really gotten to work on it. When was Thunderdome? Was that...
That was 1985.
Yeah, that was
so it's been that
mid-80s.
long.
It's been 30 years, yeah. So he knew the tone he was going for. He knew the environment he was going for. He knew the cinematography style he was going for. Now technology is so much more advanced than it was 30 years ago, especially in terms of movies. So he really brought, a mixture of what made the old Mad Max movies great and a mixture of good practical effects that really brought back the practical effects genre.
Because nowadays, whenever you see a CGI-infused action movie, a lot of it just looks kind of like a video game.
Yeah, everything's in front of a green screen usually.
Yeah.
But not in the case for this one. They really shot.
And it's like that's one of the things of film today that I hate the most because the use of practicality in film brought more of a realism to the films that we saw as an audience. But nowadays, since we're using a CGI green screen or something like that, it seems like a video game. So we know it's like almost a virtual world. We know there's a fake sense of... There's like a falsification of the film that you're watching nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I really think Mad Max needs to win something this year because it really brought back that element of practical effects that is starting to catch on again. Star Wars used it, The Revenant used it. So it's just been kind of a revolutionary movie in that it's brought back a lot of elements of film that we needed and that are important to use. I'm going to hand it over to Ivan now for his choice for Best Director.
Okay. So my choice for Best Director is going to be Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu for The Revenant, and I know it may seem kind of biased because that is my pick for Best Picture of the Year, but I'll explain. Like before, he's very singular in his style. Like no other director could replicate what he has done, and I feel like he's spent the most amount of work and effort in making this project because I looked at the other directors, like Lenny Abrahamson for Room was it was a good movie, it was just pretty generic, like any director could have made that. Tom McCarthy, I saw Spotlight. It was good. It wasn't like the most perfect movie ever, and everyone's been like critically and commercially raving about it. But it's honestly like a 7 out of 10 in my opinion, because once again, I felt like the writing was great because there was more realism in that, and by that I mean when you see a character get mad at something, it's not like the whole cliche movie thing where they like throw a chair or have a tantrum. They just kind of groan and shrug it off. So it seems more real to the audience because the audience can interpret that and think, that's exactly how I get mad. That's
So you're
that's
saying
exactly what I
that-
would do.
You're saying that they're not like Kylo Ren then?
No, not at all. So I think something should go towards the writing team of that movie, but for direction, there's really nothing special about it. I mean, I guess the actor motivations and as their characters work, but there's really nothing about that.
And that's the thing
movie.
about direction too, is you never know how much direction really went into something because there's so many other elements that play into it.
Yeah.
So you
And
never
you have
know.
to think about that whenever you watch a movie. You can't just think whenever you see a film, you can't just think of the director as
Yeah.
the number one piece of the movie. But with The Revenant, I feel like Alejandro Gonzalez was the arranger of everything.
Yeah, because he's got his said style.
He has his distinct style, and I feel like he's the only director working today that would spend 9 months in the blistering cold just to film this movie and motivate his actors to do all of these
Yeah,
almost
most directors wouldn't do that.
horrific things, like going into freezing cold temperatures with barely nothing on, being dragged like naked through the snow, and so that's pretty much why I think The Revenant should get that. And with Adam McKay in The Big Short, he had his own style. I'll give him that. That would probably be my number 3 choice if I had to pick one for best director, because a lot of his movies like Anchorman and the other guys, they're all comedies, and this is like
Yeah.
his first this movie's kind of funny but not really funny. This is his first movie about a serious topic that happened in America, the whole banking crisis of 2007 2008. And I thought he was an interesting director to pick for this movie because he's done Anchorman, which are all comedies, which are great comedies. They're arguably my favorite Will Ferrell movies because they do relate to a top thing that happened in America, which is the falsification of news and how people perceive the news on TV. I'm serious.
Yeah, there's some good satire in there.
Yeah. And so I felt like Adam McKay could have made a satire on this subject, but he didn't. He made a full frontal movie about it.
Yeah, that's a good stylistic choice, I guess.
Yeah. So that's what I liked about him, but still, for the most part, it didn't really convince me for him to win Best Director overall. If George Miller won, and next for Mad Max Fury Road, if George Miller won Best Director, I wouldn't be surprised or I wouldn't be mad because he's the only other one on this list that brought his true form of a signature style.
That's very true. There was a definite style with Mad Max that can't really be replicated by any other movie that I've seen.
Yeah. All right. Well, next up, I'm going to argue why The Revenant should win over Mad Max, over Jackson for Best Picture. Yeah.
Okay, I'll argue with you on that one.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I'll go ahead.
All right.
So before I get into my argument, I will say I haven't seen The Revenant yet. I have heard a lot of good things about it though, and I do know generally
when you see it, you're gonna think it's number 1 too. I'm just telling you that right now.
Yeah, I might think
So
that.
you're already losing this argument.
No, I haven't lost this argument yet.
All right.
But
Okay.
I will say why Mad Max, in my opinion, is the best movie. And again, I don't know if it's better than The Revenant, but I'm gonna argue why I would at least vote for it based on what I've seen. The Revenant, like you said, has had its practical effects, and you said the bear was the only thing that was
Yeah, of
CGI.
course.
Yeah, but so you have a lot of these practical effects being used in this movie, and from my perception, it might not be that Mad Max did it better, but Mad Max certainly did it first, and of bringing back practical effects. And I'm not sure necessarily on their filming schedules or whatever, but I know that Mad Max has impacted 2015 as being the year when practical effects kind of came back, and we've used a lot less CGI than in the past, decade, where the past decade we've used so much CGI for everything. So it's really nice to see that return to practical effects. But just arguing for Mad Max, I'm going to say had really solid action, really solid story, and it was told by showing the action and showing the characters, and not so much about just telling us what's going on, but it really showed what was happening. And since that's really like show, don't tell is the most important rule, in my opinion, of film, it's something that is, would really be hard for any movie, including The Revenant, to really pass up. and do better than. But I haven't seen The Revenant yet, so that's my reasoning why Mad Max should win. But maybe I might have a different opinion once I've seen The Revenant. So you can go on to your argument.
All right. So I love Mad Max's movie, but I felt like it's just recycled from the other movies, to be honest, because it's almost like the same plot. I don't know even know his full name, but Mad Max is in like a post-apocalyptic Earth.
Yeah.
There's a gang of bandits. He gets in cahoots with them. Violence and action happens. That's pretty much has been the plot of Fury Road, Thunderdome, and now this one. The only difference really is that there's more of a focus on Furiosa, and that's it. The action still filmed really well, and I'm not complaining about that. I'm not saying this is like a terrible or bad movie or okay movie at all. Like, I love this movie. I'm just saying it's kind of recycled from the other things. So
yeah,
I don't think he did anything really special with this movie.
It's a bit of a reboot. I mean, to be honest.
And I don't think a reboot should be nominated for Best Picture. I mean, book adaptations are different, but a reboot, not my thing. So, and The Revenant is based on a true story, and book adaptations make great movies if they're done the correct way.
If they're done well, for sure.
Yeah, and I felt like The Revenant was different because it's completely different from Alejandro Gonzalez's filmography, because a lot of his movies are emotionally brutal, such as 21 Grams and Amores Perros, where the brutality isn't really physical, but it's more emotional because of what the characters go through in his movies and how they're thinking and their motivations towards their actions. Whereas this one, the motivations towards their actions are more physical because they're out in the wilderness and they have to react to the environment and they have to adapt in all of what they're in and encompass and take in and breathe in what they're going through right now in the physical environment that they're placed in. Whereas in the other movies, it's just like what they're going through on the inside, events that happened that affect their mind, their state of behavior, and their mannerisms and all that. That's why I think The Revenant should win Best Picture over all of these movies. And I'll argue for the other movies on here as well, because The Big Short was good, but it didn't really impress me. It was just like, it was a good movie. It was a little, the narrative was a little unbearable at times because it kept going back towards Christian Bale for a couple of scenes, and then a majority of the movie was just Steve Carell and Ryan Gosling, and then Brad Pitt's actually rarely in this movie.
Really?
Yeah, like he's on the posters, but I swear he's only in a couple of scenes.
That's underusing a big actor right there.
It's just using it to get people in the theaters. Bridge of Spies, I thought was just pretty general. It's really exposition driven, and that's not surprising coming from Spielberg now.
Yeah,
because a lot of his like war themed movies are exposition driven, like Schindler's List and.
Spielberg's kind of hit or miss, especially these days.
Yeah, and I mean he did hit with this movie, but it didn't really hit hard for me.
Yeah.
I can't really speak on Brooklyn because I haven't seen it. Room, I think, would be an interesting choice because that's actually one movie I couldn't get through.
Really?
Yeah, not because it was bad, because just the whole thing where you're keeping a captive under your house.
How far did you get in the movie?
Like 20 minutes.
Really? Wow.
It was sad.
That's not very far.
Yeah. And The Martian it was just pretty basic. It was pretty general. It was just a book
basic
adaptation.
good movie. I mean,
yeah, like there's nothing special about it. Let's see. The Spotlight. I've said my opinion on Spotlight before. Pretty basic, good movie. 7 out of 10. All right, so now I'm gonna argue for Best Director. So do you want to argue for George Miller?
Sure.
Because I know that's your Best Director.
Yeah, George Miller. I think there isn't really much else to say other than what I've said. You know, he brought back practical effects. He told a very similar, type of story to what he's told in the past, but he did it in new and innovative ways of shooting it. It was shot the best of any of the Mad Max movies.
I agree with that.
You definitely can see that he's going for the tone he set in the movie was really solid and consistent. It was, kind of dark, but also kind of otherworldly and very strange, and just a very unique type of feel to a movie. Like I said in the last episode, I really liked the guitar player, the guy on the truck who played the guitar that shot flames out of the guitar. That was awesome. That was the most awesome thing I've seen in a movie in a long time. Maybe even the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I love the bear rape scene in The Revenant. That was the most awesome thing.
There's a bear rape.
There
scene?
is a bear rape scene.
Oh
it's
my
the most
God.
awesome thing I've ever seen in the movie this past year.
Well, I might have to check that part. I'm probably gonna have to go see The
It's
Revenant
better than
now.
the guitar. Trust me.
Well, Ivan and I actually went to go see a movie a couple days ago, and we wanted to go see The Revenant, but it was sold out. So I mean, if anything, that tells you how good that movie
Yeah.
probably is. I know I'm not helping my argument here, but like,
You're just wanting it towards mine, so
I mean,
I'm
I'll
pretty
admit
sure
you're
I'm pretty sure I
probably
already
right.
win because
You've
I saw
probably
both
won.
movies. Yeah, I win.
Yeah, but if you want to go ahead and have a closing statement on your director, then you can go ahead because
Yeah.
I think we've agreed The Revenant probably
Yeah,
is the
Alejandro
best movie.
Gonzalez Iñárritu should win Best Director. Like, this is his second year being nominated for the Oscars because last year was Birdman, and he's doing a completely different movie than Birdman with at completely different stakes, a completely different environment he's shooting in. And a lot of these movies are like the same environments where a lot of Hollywood and non-Hollywood directors shoot in, like an office building or an actual movie studio set. He's actually outside in the middle of nowhere in the freezing cold for 9 months filming this movie.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's some dedication.
Yeah, if you think about all the hard work and dedication that goes into this film and having it be the most nominated film this year, I definitely think he should be deserving of Best Director at the Academy Awards of 2016.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up right there.
All right. Well, it was good talking to you, Jackson.
Good talking to you too, Ivan.
And I'm Ivan Lichtenstein, and my partner is Jackson Witsell. And for Movies at State, we're signing off.
See you guys later. Goodbye.